HighBridge, a division of Recorded Books, presents Unnatural, a novel by Raisin, read by Shaun Grindell. Chapter 1. A few drivers had slowed to look up at the side of the coach as it circled the roundabout. Along one stretch of its window, near the back, 3 pairs of white buttocks were pressed to the glass, like a row of supermarket chicken breasts. A car came past, and the driver sounded its horn. The next driver repeated the action. When the coach lurched off the roundabout, one of the pairs of buttocks momentarily disappeared, before returning emphatically to its place alongside the others. Tom sat alone beside his kit bag, looking across the aisle at the hysterical, gurning faces of the 3 mooners. The middle one had dropped his trousers to his ankles, his cock bobbing stupidly with the motion of the vehicle as it overtook a caravan onto the dual carriageway. Tom turned away, glad that the short journey was nearly over. They were on their way to a hotel, away from the town centre, a pre-season policy enforced by the chairman in the aftermath of one eventful weekend the previous summer. Tom had not been at the club then, although he had heard the story. He'd arrived less than 2 months ago, shortly after being let go by his boyhood club at a brief and tearful meeting with a new manager. The memory of that afternoon was still difficult for him to think about. All the second-year scholars lining up in the corridor among the new man's cardboard boxes and whiteboards. The office and its stale stink of the old gaffer's cigarettes. The sight of the new manager behind the desk, calling for him to take a seat. "You're a good lad, from what I hear. Your parents should be proud of you. You're going to be some player when you grow into yourself. I've got no doubt that you'll find another club." Tom found out afterwards that he'd spoken exactly the same words to all of them, except for the 2 he had awarded first-team contracts to. 13 lads who had progressed through each of the youth levels with Tom, all hoping now for another club to phone them while they thumbed the jobs pages or took on work from recruitment agencies, shopping centres, the multiplex, all waiting to grow into themselves. Unlike most of them, though, Tom did get approached. A small club down south. His agent called him one morning to say that their chairman had organised a hotel for the night so that he could come down and talk to them with a view to a 1-year contract. "Who?" his sister asked when he told his family. "What are they? Non-league?" "No, they just got promoted from the conference. My agent says they've got money behind them." He looked away, not wanting to see her reaction, and clocked his dad already at the computer, peering, slowly nodding at the screen. The 3 backsides were turned to their seats, laughing. The middle one scanning around to see if anybody was still watching them, caught Tom's eye, and Tom gave him a dumb grin before turning to the window. Cars moved past them in the other lane. Out of some, the blue and white scarf of that afternoon's opposition flapped and spanked against the rear windows. Inside a camper van, 2 young children were sticking their tongues out at him. The match had begun promisingly. It was Tom's first start of the pre-season friendlies, and the sick, cramping tension of the dressing room had left him the moment play started. During one early scrappy passage, the ball spilled out to him on the wing, and he ran automatically at the fullback, who, stumbling, tripping, ballooned the ball away over their falling bodies for a corner. Adrenaline carried Tom towards the flag to demand the ball from the tiny ball boy. For the first time since he had left home, he was liberated from thought, absorbed in the match. He struck the corner cleanly, and from the wrestling mass of the penalty area, somebody headed the ball against the crossbar. In that instant, Tom felt something inside him let go, an excitement, a lust, that left him almost dizzy as he turned and jogged back into position. After that, though, most of the play switched to the other end of the pitch. A bungle between the central defenders, Boyne and Daesh, who were sitting now on the seats in front of Tom, watching a game show on a laptop, resulted in a goal for the home side. Confidence sank from the team. They lost 3-1. In the miserable, sweaty fug of the dressing room afterwards, Clark, the manager, told them that they were a bunch of soft fucking fairies. When one of the younger players giggled, the manager stepped forward and kicked him in the leg. The coach left the dual carriageway and joined the heavy traffic moving down a superstore-lined arterial road. By a set of traffic lights, a group of home supporters stood on the pavement outside a pub, smoking. One of them noticed the coach and gulped at it for a moment until they all understood what was next to them and started into a frenzy of hand gestures. In front of Tom, a few players turned to look at the group, but he pretended not to see them. At his old club, even the reserve team coach had tinted windows. Now, outside the top flight, the supporters were an actual presence. They came up to him in the street and at the supermarket. Inside town's small, tight, windswept ground, where they stood in little grimacing clusters along the terracing, he could already identify individual voices and faces amid them. The lights changed. He gave a final glance at the group, now rhythmically fist-pumping in an ecstasy of abuse as the coach pulled away in the direction of the hotel. He was rooming with Chris Easter, the captain, a situation that Easter seemed none too happy about, as he dumped his bag on the bed by the window, turned on the television, then pounded at the window pane for a couple of minutes before eventually accepting that it was not designed to open. He remained beside it for some time, staring out at the flat-roofed view of a neighboring retail park, occasionally giving a small shake of his head. Easter, Michael Yates and Frank Foley, the goalkeeper, were no longer allowed to room with one another, in any combination, and had all been paired with younger or newer members of the squad. Despite this, Clark did not seem to have a problem with the three keeping company if there was a night out after one of the friendlies. They sat together that evening in the first of a convoy of people carriers, and they formed a small boisterous circle with a few of the other senior players by the bar of the first place the squad went into, while everybody else piled into a large sticky red booth near the toilets. There was nowhere left to sit when Tom got to the booth, so he stood behind the curved banquette alongside the other young players, most of whom had come through the youth team and stuck together, smiling and straining to hear above the music what was being said. Sitting immediately below him, the right back, Mark Fleming, was telling a story. Tom could not hear a word of it. He kept his eyes on the top of Fleming's head, trying, in case anybody should look up at him, to appear coolly amused. The raw, greased scalp shone through Fleming's hair. Whatever it was that he was saying, the seated players were gripped by it. At the end of the story, Fleming bent forward and slapped both his palms onto the table. A wave of laughter coursed around the booth, and Fleming pushed back, obviously unaware of Tom standing right behind him because his head bumped into Tom's stomach, and he twisted to look up. "Christ, Tommy! That's the closest any of our balls has got to each other all day, that is." In that moment, Tom felt so grateful that he was almost moved to put his hand on Fleming's shoulder and attempt something funny in reply. Somebody else began speaking. Tom departed for the toilet. On his way back, in order to avoid being bought another drink, he went to the bar to buy one for himself. He did not notice until he got served that he was wedged up against the back of Frank Foley. Foley was talking to a tall young woman with bare shoulders, and each time he leaned in to speak to her, his large behind butted against Tom's hip. The woman was frowning. "What?" There was another press of the behind. The woman looked briefly out at the room before turning back to Foley. "Sorry, mate, I've never heard of you." She reached to collect 3 slim glasses of dark liquid and squeezed out from the crush at the bar. Foley stayed put, one arm on the counter, eyeballing his pint. When Tom moved away, he was still there, inert, a similar expression on his face to the one that 2,500 other people had already witnessed 3 times earlier that day. Back at the hotel in the cafe bar, Tom stayed on the periphery of the crowd of players, singing and tussling, and drinking from the bottle of rum that somebody had taken from behind the wrenched open shutters. He lingered for about half an hour before going up to bed, where he fell into a deep sleep. Held under by the fog of a dream, a dim sense that something was not normal, that he had done something wrong, and he was going to be found out. His face, his skin, beat against sheets that smelled unnatural, not his own, and he had a shooting realization that he was in somebody else's bed. They were coming into the room, about to find him there. He woke, a seizing stiffness in both legs, his face damp. In the beam from a security light in the retail park, he could see the bag still on top of the other empty bed. He stared at it for some time, his eyelids heavy, gummy with perspiration. Gradually, unmistakably, he became sure of a faint sobbing noise out in the corridor. He closed his eyes and tried to shut it out. It did not go away, though, and eventually he was forced from his bed, putting on tracksuit bottoms to go to the door. He could see as soon as he came out of the room where the noise was coming from. At the end of the corridor, in a leggy heap against a wall and beside a fire extinguisher, a young girl was slumped forward, with her forehead resting against her knees. He walked towards her. There was the smell of vomit, a dark tide mark on her shin and calf where it had run down her leg. She continued to cry quietly and did not look up at him as he knelt in front of her. She did not respond, even as he positioned one arm under her armpits, the other underneath the tacky back of first one knee, then the other, and lifted her up. In the brightness of the corridor lighting, with her eye makeup bleeding and a small pink rash on one of her temples, she looked to him even younger than his sister. "It's okay," he whispered. "It's okay." He carried her into the room and kicked Easter's bag off the bed, then laid her down and gently arranged the covers over her. She was still asleep in the same position when, with sunlight filtering through the window, Easter came in. He leaned over Tom's bed and playfully clapped him on the cheeks until he was fully awake. When Easter then left the room, looking from Tom to the girl and smirking, an unstoppable sensation of pride flared inside Tom. The feeling, and the uneasy, doubtful one that it turned into, stayed with him as he got up, showered, and woke the girl, who moved silently into the bathroom to wash her face and leg before letting herself out into the corridor. When he joined the squad downstairs, she was nowhere to be seen. He did not ask after her, and he did not say anything about what had happened to any of the others. He kept slightly apart while they filed out of the hotel to the mellow tinkling of lobby music and the weary, peeved faces of the reception staff. As he went through the revolving doors, he noticed the sap leaking from a yucca plant, broken and lolling now beside the entrance, where Boyne and Daesh had been play-fighting when Tom went up to bed. After a long, drowsy coach journey, several of the new players were dropped off at a different branch of the same hotel chain. By now, the staff of this hotel had become familiar with Tom's routine. They regarded him because of his quiet, solitary way of going about the place, his separateness from the other players, with some intrigue. For almost 2 months they had observed his daily ritual, entering the breakfast room at 9:05 for scrambled eggs, which he cut always into the same precise square inside the tray. Toast, sometimes beans, orange juice, tea. He would sit down at the same table in the corner, partly secluded by a plastic tree, and a life-sized cardboard chef holding up a plate of food unlike anything in the buffet trays, and finish his meal quickly before driving to training. He returned to the hotel in the early afternoon, and generally kept to his room until the following morning. Only when he came down to reception to receive his takeaway deliveries would there be any sign of him. The hotel was a temporary arrangement while appropriate digs were organized for him. The chairman had told Tom, his agent, and his parents when they came down to be shown around the club. They had sat in a wood-panelled room, at a large table with coffee and pastries, and the chairman had turned to his mum with a wet smile to say that when town signed somebody as young as Tom, who had just turned 19, they made sure to do right by him. Unless it was agreed that he was mature enough to live in a place of his own, he said, the club would find a good family for him to stay with in the meantime. Tom had not spoken to the chairman or any of the club staff or his agent about his accommodation since. But, as he explained to his dad every few days on the phone, now was not the right time, with a new season about to begin, to ask about digs. And living at the hotel had become normal now. He was vigilant of the other players and had learned how to pass through the public areas at different times to them. There were currently, including himself, 4 staying there. At various intervals there had been several others, all gone now to their own accommodation or to different clubs, or back onto the market. The remaining 3 carpooled to training and back, and Tom had seen them in the restaurant together, where he sometimes peeked in at them talking and laughing, and wondered if they knew each other from previous clubs. Near the beginning of his time at the hotel, there had been an older trialist staying there with his wife and 2 little girls. The man and his family were friendly to Tom. On a couple of occasions, they had asked him to join them when they had seen him sitting alone in the breakfast room. After some initial discomfort, he had enjoyed being around them, their easy conversation, the noisy distraction of the children, and a few times he and the player had carpooled together. After a couple of weeks, however, the player had been released, something that Tom did not find out until the following day, when he was told by one of the receptionists. For the final friendly fixture before the season opener, Tom was a substitute. He sat on the bench, nervous energy tightening through his muscles, alert to every twitch of Clark on the touchline, in expectation that he might at any moment turn round and instruct Tom to strip off. He visualized himself coming onto the pitch, the tempo of the game changing as his teammates, the crowd, willed the ball towards him. The low, urgent moan of anticipation from the terraces when it was at his feet, although, in fact, the ground was less than half full and partly roofless. The scarce songs and shouts of the riverside stand floating up, disappearing into the hot, bright sky. They were up against a higher division side, Coventry, and the mismatch was evident immediately. For the first 20 minutes, Clark did not turn round at all. When he did, with the team already 2 goals down, he looked dark and old with rage. Tom was sent on for the second half. He did not receive the ball for some time, and drifted in-field from his position on the wing, eager to become involved. Coventry scored again before he had even touched the ball, and as his impatience grew, he raced into an uncontrolled challenge on the opposition captain. He knew instantly, from the sharp pain in the arch of his foot, that he would have to come off. He lay there, an awareness of the manager, his teammates, his dad, knuckling his chest, pinning him to the grass. In the treatment room after the match, Clark's voice resonating violently down the corridor, the foot was already bruising. The physio sponged it clean, dressed it, and told him to get home and put it straight onto ice. The hotel receptionist misunderstood him. She went away for a few minutes and came back with a still champagne bucket, rustling with ice, and a folded white cloth. "It's for my foot." "Oh, I see. Sorry," she smiled. "Do you need some more?" "No, thanks." And then, "I'll get champagne if we ever win a match." She smiled again. "All right, I'll remind you about that." He limped away with the bucket, grinning with unexpected elation. "That is a superb cock, mate." Foley stood, plainly assessing the scholar next to him in the showers. The boy who had trained with the firsts that morning angled his body marginally away and carried on washing himself, affecting not to have heard. Foley, though, stood motionless, water collecting on the large plateau of his head, looking down at him. "Hey, Yatesy!" he shouted through the dressing room. "You remember Davo's cock?" Yates from the bench looked up briefly from lacing his trainers. "I do." "That was some cock." All around the dressing room, the younger players waited cautiously for the right moment to laugh, but Foley and Yates continued to behave as though nothing out of the ordinary had just happened, showering, changing as normal. So the players turned automatically to the young boy, hastening from the showers towards his space along the bench, wrapping a towel about his middle. Tom kept his eyes to the floor, anxious somebody might see him looking and bring the room's attention on him. Prohibited from running or kicking a ball for at least a week, he was nevertheless required to come in daily for training. Like the other injured players, he had to get there an hour early and leave after the rest of the squad had departed. There were 2 others, Fleming and Boyne, both with minor knocks and bruises. All were kept, deliberately it seemed to them, out of the final preparations for the first match of the season. If they were not in the treatment room, being entertained by the physio's military fitness stories, they were travelling over to the stadium to use the gym for long sessions on the treadmills and weight machines, to a constant backdrop of loud music and Sky Sports news. Or they were sitting on the bench against the wall of the clubhouse, looking across the field at the team going through their drills and shape preparations. "It's a joke," Boyne said, as the sound of Clark shouting and clapping wafted across the pitches to them. "He thinks we're going to contaminate them or something." "No, Boyney," Fleming said, without moving his eyes from the squad. "It's a warning to the lot of us. Don't get injured." Clark came into the treatment room a couple of days before the game to tell all three that they would not be included in the party travelling to Cheltenham. They were to stay at home, focus on their rehabilitation. On the morning of the match, Tom drove to the laundrette. There was a laundry service at the hotel, he knew from his welcome folder, but he did not like the idea of somebody else handling his clothes, his underwear. So he returned each week to the same quiet place that he had found on the outskirts of town. He went inside and saw there were no other customers. Unhurriedly, he bought some washing powder from the dispenser, loaded the machine, and went into the cafe next door to get some breakfast to eat in the car. He put on the radio for the match build-ups. He sipped his tea, unwrapped the warm, sweating paper from his bacon and egg roll. Saturday excitement rising and tugging at his gut as the coverage skipped from voice to voice, ground to ground, deflating when he looked down at his injured foot. 40 minutes later, he went back into the laundrette, hauled his sodden mound of clothes into one of the dryers, noticing as he did so one of his sister's socks melded inside the sleeve of a sweater he rarely wore, and went out once more to his car. When he re-entered at the end of the drying cycle, there was another customer, a man in gym gear sitting on one of the benches. The man looked up as he walked past, but Tom did not acknowledge him and headed towards his dryer. Some of the clothes did not feel fully dry. He pulled them out anyway, bundling everything into his IKEA sack, aware, through the glass of the dryer door, of the man watching him. He concentrated on his task, blocking the man out, his senses beginning to pulse with the echoed scrabble of his fingers against the drum, the thump of a washing machine behind him, until his clothes were all in the sack, and he made his way down the thin aisle, certain that the man was about to speak or stand up and face him. When Tom stepped outside into the cool street, his chest and lungs loosened, expelling the stifling air of the laundrette in long, even breaths as he made for his car. It was obvious, sitting next to the steaming sack on the passenger seat, that his clothes were still more than a little damp. On getting back to his room, he decided that he would drape them over the radiators, but after a short search, he realized there were no radiators in the room, only a climate control vent on one of the walls, quite high up. He thought about phoning his mum, but straight away ruled it out. It would make her worry, make her believe that he was not coping, besides which, he reasoned, she would be in a baby clinic, busy. He unthreaded the lace from a trainer and tied it to one handle of the IKEA sack. Then he pulled a chair over to the wall beneath the vent and stood on it to reach up and attach the lace to a bar of the grill, so that the sack hung just below it. After tugging on it to see the lace held, he turned up the heating on the control panel and went to sit down on the bed with his back against the headboard. He had fallen asleep in the warm smog of fuming clothes when his dad called at the regular time, 10 minutes before football focus. "Feeling good?" "Fine, yeah, I suppose." His dad laughed. "No point getting down about it. You're a footballer. Sometimes you're going to be injured. It's how you pick yourself back up that counts." "I'm not in his plans." "You're not in his plans today." "Maybe." There was the buzzing of a vacuum out in the corridor. "Yeah, maybe." "Talking of plans, I want to come down and see you." "It's all right, Dad," Tom said as brightly as he could, annoyed with himself for sounding like a sulky child. "I'm doing fine. You're right. Another week of rehab and I'll be back training. I've spoken to the sorting office and they've said I can have the afternoon off to drive down on Friday." "What, this Friday?" "Busy, are you?" his dad said, tickled. No, that's fine, Dad," he said quickly. "That's fine." He looked up at the bag of washing shackled to the vent, and he had a powerful conviction that his dad knew what he had done, that he could see it all. The daft contraption of his mouldering clothes on the wall, Tom dozing on the bed, the man in the laundrette. A flickering perception came to Tom of the boy that his dad probably brought to mind when he thought about him, which he suppressed, pulling himself upright on the bed. "I'll come straight down after work Friday then. Might as well book a room in your hotel. Keep things simple. Go to the first home match next day. We could watch it together, if the foot's still bad. Or would you need to be with the squad?" "No, he doesn't like injured players in with the others." "Right then. Sorted." After they said goodbye, Tom thought that he probably should have offered to book the room for him, and he wondered if his dad had expected him to. He put on the television for Football Focus and pictured his dad at home, watching it too. On the sofa, tray on his lap, mug of tea, fry-up. His sister upstairs, keeping out of the way until John from the sorting office arrived to pick up their dad. The drive to Uncle Kenny's and the short chat in the kitchen with Jeanette before the three men went into the city to take up their positions at the bar in the pre-match pub. Everything normal, ongoing. There was a knock on his door, the housekeeper wanting to make up his room. "No, thank you," he called out. He moved to the wall and took down his clothes. They were no drier than before, wetter somehow. He tipped them all into the bottom of his wardrobe to sort out later, and brought the sack over to the desk to collect up his takeaway boxes. He went for a walk around the car park. He dumped his rubbish into the bulk bins at the back of the kitchens, something that he had taken to doing rather than leave his cartons and boxes around the tiny pedal bin in his room. He felt a bit weird at the thought of the housekeepers seeing them, dealing with them, just as he felt weird about putting up his posters or his speakers, leaving out his dumbbells, his cactus collection. He kept these things underneath the bed, and when he returned each afternoon took them out, putting the cacti on the windowsill and a limited alternating selection of his posters up on the walls until it was time to take them down again in the morning. He followed the scores on his laptop while he watched the television. With a few minutes of their match remaining, Town were 2-1 down, and Tom realized that he wanted them to lose, for his absence to be taken notice of, spoken about. When full-time confirmed the defeat, he refreshed the page to be certain. His dad arrived early in the evening. They went for a drink, then a meal in a pizza restaurant. He was doing well, his dad told him before the food arrived, adapting, young as he was. He was proud of him. Tom did not know what to say. He looked across the table and saw his dad's determination to say these words to him, that he had planned them. Tom avoided his gaze and looked down at the tough, broken knuckles of his dad's hands on the table, calculating how much this time off work would be costing him. From the top of the main stand, with the high August sun on their faces, the formation and movement of the teams was starkly outlined. After half an hour, Tom was too ashamed to watch. His view moved over the opposite stand towards the black, flashing river, and the plain of fields and houses and roads, stretching away towards a range of hills, beyond which, although he had not seen it yet, was the sea. His dad, however, was watching the contest intently. He always watched football like this, hunched forward, elbows on his knees, studying the play. He spoke very little during the game, and Tom could not bring himself to look round and see his inevitable disappointment at each broken-down move or misplaced pass, each booted clearance disappearing over the top of the riverside stand to the sarcastic cheers of the away supporters. That this, after all those years of outlay and sacrifice, was what Tom had amounted to. After the defeat, they went back to the hotel. Before his dad set off up north, they sat in the cafe bar and spoke about the match. His dad was not impressed with Clark. "It's big man hoofball," he said. "It doesn't suit your game." "It's League Two, Dad." "Doesn't matter. Football's football. But a proper player will always shine through, even in a side like that." "Not if he's in the stand." "Come on, Tom. Don't be soft." He regarded Tom for a moment. "There's no use feeling sorry for yourself, son. You're at a bottom division club, and you're injured. It's an education, is it, to think about being here. On your way back up, there are plenty of others who've done it that route. You've just got to work that bit harder is all." He looked past Tom towards the bar. "Tell you what, fancy a hot chocolate before I go?" "All right," Tom said.
Sample complete. Ready to continue?